So, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Deercast. Today, Harry and I are joined by Nick Rout. Nick is head of training for the British Deer Society. It was sort of happy coincidence, I think, from our point of view, happy coincidence that Nick ended up on this podcast. We actually reached out to the BDS to see if they might loan us someone to come on the podcast, and I think Nick's boss gave him the dubious task of appearing on the podcast, or perhaps Nick volunteered himself. I don't know, but when we rang the BDS, it was amazing from our point of view. They'd sort of mentioned that they potentially were interested in coming on anyway, so it didn't take a huge amount of convincing, I wouldn't say. But anyway, Nick, thank you very much for joining us. As I said, I don't know if you volunteered or if you were told to help us out.
Well, yeah. Hello, Tom and Harry. Well, did I volunteer or was I told? A difficult one, that really. I can't actually remember because it was quite a while ago we sort of organised this.
It was,
so yeah. It was. I don't know, but anyway, I don't mind doing this sort of thing. So here I am in front of you guys to hopefully answer a few questions about the British Deer Society and the way forward and what we're doing.
Yeah, and so I think. I feel silly saying this because I'm sure everyone out there will know what the British Deer Society is or how it came about. But for those that perhaps don't, especially if they're kind of new to the industry, if I can put it that way, do you want to give us just a really short bit of background in terms of what the BDS is, why it was created, what its purpose is, etc.?
Yeah, no problem at all. Well, you say a lot of people know what it is. One of the biggest things that I find with the British Deer Society is that people don't realise we're actually a charity. We're not a business. We're not a membership business like the other organisations. We are a charity, and we rely upon people doing charitable donations, whether it's their annual membership or people actually just donating money or people helping in other ways. But we are a charity, which is not that well known. And it's quite frustrating at times when you're up against organisations which are just membership organisations and businesses, and you're trying to get across the views of deer. And we are all about deer and deer welfare and everything that goes along with deer and the deer managers within the countryside. We reach out on a weekly basis to about 60,000 people through our various social media outlets. We've got a lot of reach. We service just over 5,000 actual stalking members. So we're quite involved with the industry on the actual getting the job done side of things. And we're 60 years old this year. So we were formed in 1963. So this year, 2024, is our 60th anniversary. So I wasn't about the beginning of it, thankfully, but yeah, it's been, and it was formed about the welfare of deer, because back when it was first formed, was in the early days of people actually starting to care about deer and not treating them as vermin. And it's important that we make sure they don't get degraded back to the status of vermin, whichever species that may be.
It is the 60-year anniversary. Is that why the new British Deer Field Guide has been published, or is that just purely coincidence?
Yeah, the new field guide, it was decided that we try and get it updated and produced, which we've managed to do for this year, and it fits in very nicely. And it is have you seen one yet?
I've seen everyone is posting copies, as in pictures of it on Instagram, and it looks, especially with Katie Hargreaves' illustrations, so she's a previous podcast guest, it looks amazing, but I haven't yet bought myself a copy. So it is something I need to go out and do.
Yeah, no,
I can't believe how cheap it is.
Well, it's supposed to be that everybody can have a copy.
Yeah.
How much? And it was.
Is it only £10, £12?
I don't know. I've got to be honest. I don't know, but it's. I'm sure somebody can have a quick look on their phone. But what I do know is that we released it on, I think, the Monday, and the first day that we advertised it, we sold out in about 4 hours. So it was like
I haven't heard of it. What's in it?
It's £9.99, which I think is an absolute bargain. So I've got one of the really like antique old versions that someone gave me years ago. I wish I had it with me. It's in the other room, and so the version I've got, whether this one is the same, but it sort of has pictures of all the deers, gives you an idea of how their antlers grow, like sort of footprints, weights, and just a little bit of like information about all the different species and times of year and cycles. And it's the version I've got is kind of like pocket size, so you could keep it in your stalking bag or car if you wanted to, and you were kind of out and thought, oh, I wonder what, and the pictures I've seen of this version are similar in terms of that sort of size.
And I think you've just summed up exactly what it's about. It's just a field guide so that everybody sees it for what it is. I haven't managed to get hold of a copy yet, so when I do, it will go in on the bookcase with all the other books. But just let's hope that everybody doesn't rush out and buy too many of them, and I can't actually get a copy. That would be bad, right? Wouldn't it?
So if someone's kind of sat there at home listening to this, going, "Okay, that's great. I now know what the BDS is." I mean, why would you tell them they ought to go out there and become a member? I'm sorry if that's putting you on the spot slightly.
Why should people be a member? I think it all comes back to that charity thing. Why do animal lovers join the World Wildlife Fund? Why do bird lovers join the RSPB? It's about giving a little bit back, whether that's through financial support, through charitable giving, to an organisation which is there to look after deer. We're there to represent deer when perhaps nobody else will do, or people just look at deer as being a business. To us, it is very much a case of making sure that the welfare is looked after for the deer's point of view, and making sure that we don't lose that status of deer and where they are in the community, because they are the biggest land mammals we have on the British Isles, and people like to see them. People like to see deer. People like to interact with deer. But we've also got to be realistic in that the interactions people have with deer aren't always positive. A lot of people, their first and last time they ever deal with a deer is when it's on the bonnet of their car. And that's not a great way forward for anybody, is it? There's a number of people killed every year through deer RTAs that we know of. Of course, if somebody swerves to miss a deer and ends up dead in a ditch, you'll never know. But it's a sad reality of large animals on the road which aren't managed properly and are in, can be in quite high numbers in certain areas.
And as a membership, as a sort of as a charity, what if someone goes out and signs up tomorrow and says, "Oh, I'll join the BDS and I'll support them in everything they do"? Do they get signed up to all the social media stuff? Do they get publications? What's the sort of membership package?
Right.
If you like?
So your membership package is you get 4 magazines a year. You can opt in to all of the digital stuff, because with GPDR and everything else the way it is nowadays, you can't just give everybody anything automatically. They have to opt into stuff to receive any kind of information. But what it does do is gives you access to our training facility, which is my big thing. I'm obviously the person who's in charge of making sure we're getting people trained, making sure that deer are managed properly, and there's a font of information there. Plus, you're also helping to fund the research that we do. So we like to try and represent deer in the best way possible by actually having evidence rather than anecdotal guesses. We'd rather have, there are X amount of deer. We need to cull these deer, not those deer. And you can't just lump deer all in as one species and just go deer, kill. It's not the way forward. We're about making sure that doesn't happen.
And on the training side of things, what does the BDS offer in terms of training? What does your sort of week look like if you sort of think about what you've got to do?
Yeah, we do represent the DMQ, Deer Management Qualifications. We're one of the assessment centres for them, and through them we roll out on a regular basis DSC1, Deer Stalking Certificate Level 1, which is the introduction to deer stalking. It's the very first step that most people will take. It is becoming more of a requirement. It is something that certain police forces are saying that you need to have your level 1 before they'll give you a deer condition for your firearms ticket. That's not strictly the way it should be, because at the end of the day, it should be based on whether you're actually competent and capable of being in charge of a rifle. But they're saying they want to see this training, which it shows a level of competence. It shows that you've undertaken some safety training. And it's a good first step. We then roll out on the Deer Stalking Certificate 2, which is the next step up. And that is a practical assessment of where you did your theory stuff in your level 1. Although in your level 1, you do actually get to handle a firearm and shoot the test at 100 meters down to 20 meters or 10 meters. And yeah, so level 2 is a practical demonstration that you are actually capable of shooting a deer, stalking a deer. You've got the right equipment, and then you can do the actual gralloch and put it into the food chain in a way that it's safe to go into the food chain. But it actually, the moment it's dead, the moment it's on the ground laying there, that beast becomes food. And it's about making sure that that food is put forward in the right way to the public to eat and consume, or even if it's your own family.
There's another course you guys do, which I've been on, and is absolutely brilliant, which is, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 days, which is the deer management course or deer management qualification. So I went on it a few years ago. I've been desperately trying to persuade Harry to go on it, because for me, it was like Mecca in terms of it's entirely classroom based, but we kind of sat down, and I've got the training manual over there, and it's in its ring binder, and I still look back on it every now and then. But you cover everything, sort of from like doing how you do a deer census, how you do a deer count, how you would do sort of population modeling, how you come up with a cull plan, how you age deer, how you sex deer, everything. But you spend, like, because it's 2 or 3 days, you get to spend a sort of a solid hour on each of the different topics out there. And for me, because I'm not a massive bookworm, I can't really sit down and just read a textbook. It needs to be interactive for me. And so that course was brilliant, because you just got to go into everything in so much detail. And the guys,
and of course the big one was the cull planning that you had to do. Where actually get you to sit down and work out a quite complicated way of working out how many of each of the sexes and age groups that you need to actually be culling to get a successful cull at the end of it. So that's a pretty in-depth course. We do an introduction to stalking. So introduction to DSC1, introduction to stalking, whereby it's a single day course where you get a bit of hands-on experience with a rifle, and you get a little bit of a rundown of what to expect within the classroom environment. We do some firearms awareness training, and we're looking at doing a couple of new courses. We do the wild boar assessment through DMQ, and we're looking to do squirrels, which is different for a deer organisation to be looking at squirrels. But in exactly the same way as wild boar, we want to give our members who are stalkers, who are actively out there, we want to give them a full toolkit of training facilities, so that when their landowner turns around and says, look, I need the squirrels dealing with in this woodland, you can be the person who steps up, because you're in the wood anyway, and deal with the squirrels and deal with the wild boar and deal with any other problems that might come along. So it's about making all of our guys a lot more rounded, well trained, and covering off all the elements that perhaps they hadn't even considered as part of a deer manager's role.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And have you thought about doing any sort of virtual training? Because I know that's becoming a lot more sort of popular, as going, doing these. Quite a few people can't, access going and doing in-person courses as quickly as they might want to, or whatever. And there's quite a few out there now.
We are already there on that. So we already do that. So we've got the wild boar course, the training element of that is all online. So you have to you get access to a website whereby you can go on, you set tests, tasks, and you complete those. And once you're getting it up and running well, it should be about 8 to 12 hours of learning. And then you have to go to an assessment day, because DMQ, who are the awarding body, do insist that we have to have face-to-face assessments, which is fine, because you need to be having people tested at DSC1 level, at the wild boar level. In my opinion, you've got to have them done by proper work-based assessors. They've got to be properly assessed. It's got to be a solid way of assessment. And then where we do things through the DMQ way is it goes to an internal verifier. They look at everything. They make sure everything is correct. So it's not just down to one person to do the course marking. And then it goes up the next level to an external assessor who looks at it and makes sure that everything is absolutely tip top from a assessment centre like a BDS point of view. And it's a system that works, and it guarantees that when you get your qualification, whichever assessment centre you've done it through, it guarantees that you've got that certain level and standard that you've achieved in getting it. You're not doing it by some outfit which is claiming to give you XYZ certification when actually it doesn't mean anything, because you haven't got that proper assessment-based testing in there. If that makes sense.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And so, Nick, one of the reasons we've ambushed you and got you on this podcast is we know one of the projects you have been working on, which we might come on to in a minute. But are there any other sort of things in the pipeline that BDS are working on at the moment that people ought to be aware of, aware of and know about?
Yeah, we are doing our online level 1. That is imminent. That will be with us very, very shortly. Other than that, it is just the day-to-day getting stuff done. Well, at least that's all I'm going to tell you about anyway.
The rest you'd have to kill us.
Well, maybe not kill you, but maim you.
Keep us posted. So the online DSC1, that's the whole thing, apart from the shooting assessment, you can do all virtually.
No, you'll have to do all of the assessments have to be done. So you'll go for a 1-day assessment.
Oh, I see. So you do all the training. You do like the 2 days, if you like, or the 1-day virtual training, and then okay.
But it's more than 1 day. It's more than 1 day. You need to be to get through the level 1. I would say that anybody going into their level 1 isn't going to be able to turn up for a 1 or 2 day course before sitting an assessment day and pass it without having done a lot of homework. Because I guess you guys have both done your level 1s.
Yeah.
And as you will know, that it's not as easy as you might think. And especially people who think they're a little bit switched on, they generally think, I'll do that. It's an easy course. I've done a bit of deer stalking. I've got a bit of experience. They pick the manual up a week before they're about to do the course and go, oh dear, this is a little bit more than we thought. And it can be hard work.
Yeah, there are quite a few bits in there that could catch you out. I mean, for example, even some of the minimum bullet or grain weights, because if you kind of started out in life and you've gone immediately to, say, a caliber that's above that, so say you started out with a 270 or 308, so you've never had to think, okay, well, what's the minimum bullet grain weight for roe or red or whatever? And then suddenly that question comes up in your assessment and you go, oh God, well, unless I've revised for that, I don't know. Or when are most calves born, or when most fawns born, for example, which months of the year, which again, you might be used to seeing them in practice if you've done a lot of deer stalking, but actually the fact of when they're born, unless you've done that revision, you may not know.
Yeah, and reality is the guys in Scotland, unless they've done an awful lot of travelling, they're not really likely to have come across Monjack or Chinese water deer, for example.
No.
So it's you do have to have fairly rounded knowledge of all things. But the one thing we do have is we've got our ultimate deer data, which is an online tool which has been there for quite a few years now. and gives you a whole ranch of questions. It is huge, the amount of questions you get. And it also gives you explanations and answers to the questions. And you can do an awful lot of the work through Ultimate Deer Data as an online tool and get yourself pretty well up to speed.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before. Ultimate Deer Data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sign up for it on the website, on the online training.
There we go.
And the other thing we do is we do humane animal dispatch training, and we do the odd course on that. But again, that can be very much driven by what the police force in that area is wanting to do. But that is a course where it's an attendance only course for knowledge and information, really.
Yeah. So again, I'm sounding like your biggest fan, but I've done that course as well, because I just wanted to know, in terms of sort of, again, being a deer stalker, people have run me in the past and gone, oh, we've got an injured deer on the farm or whatever. I mean, yes, you can turn up and just blat it at 100 meters with your normal stalking rifle, but actually you sort of think, well, is there something else I should be doing? Is there a better way to be doing it? And actually, I think that course, certainly from my point of view, gave me, I think, the kind of knowledge to be able to go out and do it, perhaps more safely, humanely, and I don't know, compassionately, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, that would be fair. That would be fair. Yeah, and there's a lot of considerations as well when you are going out there to dispatch an animal roadside or caught in a fence, or there's an awful lot of safety things which, if you rush into it a little bit hot-headed because all you're thinking about is the deer welfare and I've got to kill a deer, because you can end up getting quite badly injured yourself, or somebody around you could be injured. All kinds of things can go wrong. So it is a lot of consideration, even just dispatching a deer which you may have shot earlier on and caught up with. It can be useful to know.
So I feel like I kind of alluded to this earlier, Nick, but one of the main reasons for getting you on, or for you volunteering to come on, was to talk to us, and I'm going to butcher the name here, so you'll have to correct me, was to talk about the British Wild Venison.
British Quality
I've got it wrong
Wild
already.
Venison.
British Quality
Wild Venison.
There you go. Which, for any of our listeners that don't know, it's and again, you're gonna have to correct me on this, Nick. It's a quality assurance scheme that is coming down the tracks. It's not live yet. Would you say it was live?
It is sort of live. It's there. It's there to be done. It's there to happen. I suppose what we probably should do is just wind back a little bit as to why we've done this. And this whole thing was born out of a meeting in East Anglia with the industry partners and the Forestry Commission, and we've been having these meetings for a long time. It's called the East of England Deer Forum. It really works well. It's anybody who's got anything to do with deer as an organisation can come along to it, and it's a good way of feeding in. And we were discussing in early 2020 the downturn in venison cost, in the price of venison that we were getting paid. It had dropped to sub £1 a kilo, and it was a concern to us. So it was something we were starting to look at, and then COVID happened. So where we already had a pretty low marketplace price-wise, the game dealers had absolutely no market at all. The tap was just turned off. They didn't need venison at all, which you can understand, because a lot of their marketplace was either being shipped out to Europe, or it was going to local establishments, pubs, restaurants, where it was being served up to people. And as all they were shut, that was the market finished and gone. So an online group, we got together and started discussing the various ways about how we could improve and help make the marketplace better for deer. And of course, whilst we want to try and sell as much locally as we can, so that your local people around you as a stalker are getting venison, the big market is the likes of Tesco's and Sainsbury's, Aldi's and Waitrose. They're the people who are going to take a lot of venison. And if you look at the shelves now, they have some British venison supplied through one of the game dealers, but also there's an awful lot of New Zealand venison on the shelves. Now, in an age where we worry about carbon offset and how much it costs us to get our food from the field to the plate, how can it be justified to ship from New Zealand to England venison just because it can be supplied in a standard uniform size? So it was, how do we get into the marketplace? How do we get to the supermarkets? Well, the easy answer is we have to have a quality assurance. The supermarkets, they look at things like Red Tractor. They have to have Red Tractor if you want to supply supermarkets, or British Retail Consortium. It's all the standards all these different organisations have to adhere to make sure that things are up to the standard whereby they can sell it onto the public. And with all the best will in the world, there can be a really, really huge variance in the quality of venison going into a game dealer. And where everybody like to think they're doing a good carcass, when you've got bits of intestine still inside the carcass, where you've got flumes of poo inside the carcass still, where it's been washed out with water and it's got mold inside the carcass. It happens. It appears in the game dealers, and it shouldn't. And that's what we've got to try and eliminate. So we sat down and we discussed it, and this was all the agencies, this was all of the organisations. We engaged with the Grown in Britain, who are sort of running it from a top end down, and we've engaged with the AGHEs. They've engaged with their market, which is the supermarkets, and we've got what we have in place now. So we've got the 3 tiers of people doing it. Well, 2 tiers. You've got the processors, which is the AGHEs, and you've got the producers, which are the guys on the ground, the stalkers. And that can be split into 2 groups. There's the ones who can become a producer in their own right. So that's people who are, as a unit, as a group, as an estate, might be producing 300 plus carcasses. And there's also the group scheme, which is people who are producing under 300 carcasses. So it makes it more affordable for them to be part of it. And that's the group scheme is members of the British Deer Society. Go on.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm just
Go
thinking, so for, say one of our members out there, they shoot 25 deer a year, they would sign up as a group producer, would they?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yeah.
But providing they're a member of BDS, or do they? Yeah.
No. It can be basically anybody. I mean, it's the group scheme is run through the NGO, the BDS, and BASC.
Yeah.
And BASC actually do the management of it. They're doing all of the work side of it. And yeah, anybody can sign up for it. You don't have to be a member of BASC to do it. You can be a member of BDS or the NGO. So it's quite inclusive. Anybody can do it. And when you do sign up, you obviously have to fill in all the paperwork. You've got to have all of your paperwork registered. You've got to be level 2. You've got to be trained hunter. You've got to have jumped through a lot of hoops just to put your application in. But in reality, any of the hoops that you've jumped through, including being a registered food business with your local council, if you're selling deer to an AGHE anyway, you should have done anyway. So you're not actually being asked to do anything more than what, as a good business supplying an AGHE, should be doing anyway.
Yeah.
So you sign up to it through the British Quality Wild Venison website, and they'll do it's done through an external auditors, SIA, who are an international company, and they run the auditing side of things. They then look at all the paperwork, and as a group scheme member, it then comes back to us at the group scheme, whereby one of the auditors will come out, one of our trained auditors will come out, and we'll do a physical inspection of your larder to make sure it's up to spec, and you basically are what you say you are.
Like very roughly, what is that standard in terms of having all? What's the sort of equipment standard that you need? I'm really putting you on the spot here.
You need a clean larder. You
Yeah.
need a well-maintained larder. You need to have the correct equipment within the larder environment. You need to be able to wash things down, keep things clean and tidy, keep your equipment clean and tidy, keep your vehicles clean and tidy that you're moving the deer in. And that's what you should be doing if you're a registered food business with your local council anyway. It's not onerous.
I suppose you might have been asking this, Harry, sort of slightly indirectly, but say you were using a Coke fridge as your chiller, would you be providing it was clean and tidy? Does that tick the box, or would you have to be? It has to be a sort of purpose-built larder chiller, if you know what I mean.
My view on a Coke fridge would be that actually, so long as it can get the carcass down to below 7 degrees or below in a good time, and it can maintain it with a good airflow within the cabinet and the chiller, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I would say that if you're going to be becoming a member of the scheme and all you're doing is storing one deer in a Coke fridge for occasional collection, it's probably not going to be worth you becoming a member of the scheme.
Yeah.
And of course, you don't need to be a member of the scheme. The game dealers are still going to take venison from you. They still have a marketplace for it, because they only need the British Quality Assurance stuff to go through into supermarkets. So they've still got a really good marketplace for all the venison people who don't want to sign up. But you don't have to sign up for it.
So the idea is that if for me, for instance, if I registered and I became assured, etc., and I sold my carcasses to an AGHE, they could then sell that venison on to a supermarket. Whereas if I wasn't signed up, then they can't do that at all. They just have to sell it on to a restaurant or a pub or wherever else.
They sell it onto their normal marketplace. Yeah, it is about opening the marketplace within the supermarkets for wild venison.
So there'll be presumably a time when, if the supermarkets, if and when they get involved in the scheme and buy into it, if you like, that me shooting 50, 100 carcasses a year, say, having been signed up, will be able to sell my venison at a premium to the AGHEs. That's the sort of idea behind it?
That's a very nice idea of how we'd want things to go. Yes, we would love to see. We'd love to see that if you've put that bit of effort in and you've made sure that you've got all of everything in place so you can provide quality assured venison, it would be great that you get paid a premium.
Yeah. It makes sense.
I think what we're more likely to find is that keep that marketplace open. If you want to get rid of your deer at all through an AGHE, then you're going to have to end up being quality assured, would be the ideal scenario, so that all the venison is then going into the supermarket. Now, that does also play really well into the hands of people who haven't gone through the process of paying money to be a quality assured scheme, and they're just still doing really good quality venison, but they're doing it at a local level. Because once the housewife gets used to buying venison from a supermarket, when they realise that they can buy it from a local farmer's market at probably a reduced price, then it actually will benefit local guys who are supplying their farmers markets and other outlets as well. So it's all about making venison more of a appetizing meal to people.
Yeah.
So and so it's big picture thinking.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I've just been on the website, and it's taken me through to the SAI Global, which has then taken me through to an Intertech thing. But how if I was looking to sign up tomorrow, how much is it to sign up as a producer? Do you know? I mean, 50 quid, 500 quid.
As a group scheme member, I'm going to say it's about £250.
Okay.
But
So if
I will
you were
say at the
shooting,
moment, the Forestry
go on.
Commission are helping, and they're subsidising some of the joining fees. So I don't know the exact figures for what it costs, but what I do know is that the Forestry Commission are picking up about 50% of the joining fee, so that you can get into it and get it started and help try and kickstart things. So it could bring it down to just over £100 to become a group scheme member.
No, okay. And if you were getting, in a perfect world, say £1 or 150 extra a kilo for assured venison, then that's very worth doing, isn't it? Really.
I think if the gamekeepers offered us £1.50 extra for an assured carcass, there wouldn't be a deer stalker on this planet who wouldn't be an assured supplier.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
I'm possibly going to come at this with a slightly pessimistic angle, because my sort of day job, my trade is farming, and so I deal with the red tractor kind of assurance side of things on a fairly day in day out basis. And I think right at the beginning of my career, everyone was just saying, "Oh, we all need to become red tractor assured because it will get us a premium," and it sort of did for a while. And then after a while, that just became kind of factored into the price. And I think you may have slightly alluded to this, Nick, where you said, well, with grain, for example, now you basically can't get rid of it unless it is red tractor assured. So whereas before you used to get a premium for it, now if I rang up Frontier and said I've got 1,000 tons of wheat to go, they'd go, I don't think they even ask anymore. They just assume you are red tractor assured, and if you're not, they don't take it. And
but not every farmer is red tractor assured.
No.
So there is a marketplace out there for people who aren't red tractor assured.
Yeah.
And I guess also you're looking at red tractor assured things. Maybe you're looking at getting contracts at the beginning of the year before you even put the grain in the ground. So there can be swings and roundabouts in everything, can't there?
Yeah, definitely.
But I think, as a country, we've got some of the highest food quality, in the entire world, and it's something that I think we can be. The country is quite proud of in general, and if that does become the case, I wouldn't say that's that bad a thing necessarily, that everyone actually provides venison to a seriously decent standard, because you like you say, some of the things that you hear down the grapevine of game dealers have had this and that, and you've had a mouldy carcass or whatever. It's not acceptable in the food world.
No.
It really isn't. When you compare it to cheap meat and beef and whatever, that just wouldn't fly, for 1 minute. And so from a supermarket's perspective, I kind of understand them wanting that level of assurance, because their consumers won't accept it. They barely want to eat a wonky carrot, let alone a piece of meat with a bit of hair in it or something. So they're beholden to the consumers, aren't they, who are ultimately quite picky these days.
It's a fantastic website, the British Quality Wild Venison website, in terms of very clearly laid out, lots of information on there. And so, I mean, anyone who hasn't seen it and is kind of sat there listening to this podcast thinking, well, I need to learn more about it, or I want to know more about it, I would definitely, it's only my first time looking at it, but I would definitely point you in that direction, because it seems like everything's on there.
Yeah, it's hopefully it is all on there, and hopefully over time it will build up momentum, and it will become something we can, as an industry, hopefully be proud of. And I know it's not going to tick everybody's boxes, but nothing ticks everybody's boxes, does it?
No, definitely not.
No, exactly. And so the BDS, in terms of their involvement with it, you were involved in drafting it and producing it, but it's ultimately overseen by DEFRA. Is that right? Or is it the BDS?
It's an industry scheme.
Okay.
So it genuinely has been put together by the three main organisations. There are other people involved, but the main organisations being the NGO, BASC, and ourselves, BDS.
Yeah.
And the Forestry Commission, because the Forestry Commission, however we dress it up, are the single biggest supplier of carcasses. They don't, in the big picture of how many carcasses are shot through the course of a year, it's less than 10%, because the vocational stalkers, the deer managers who are going out there and doing a really good job at the weekends and the evenings, and when they can get a day off of work or they're doing shift work, those deer managers are very professional in their outlook. They're going out there, they're trained, they're well trained, they're making sure they've got the right equipment, they're making sure they've got their quad bike tickets, their first aid, they've got all the proper insurances. They're very, very professional in the way they do things. So they go out and they're doing, combined, we do an awful lot as a group, as they're members of them organisations. We're shooting probably 200,000 deer a year, which is a huge amount of deer, possibly more. And that's one of the things which I'd like to come on to is numbers. We don't know how many deer we've got in the country. We don't know how many deer we've got in certain areas. We don't know how many deer are being shot. We can take a good guess. We can take an educated guess, but it is a guess. For many years, we've banded around this a number of 2 million deer. We've got no idea.
Is that something BDS are looking to address then? Both in terms, you've really piqued my interest there in terms of the idea of not knowing how many are shot, because the idea of some kind of central reporting system both really excites me, but also really terrifies me for some reason, in terms of, I suppose, part of me inside is going, oh, it's a big brother, it's another layer of admin. But part of me as well as a deer stalker is saying, well, surely that's really important, because unless we know how many are being culled, of which species and where, we don't know if we're even scratching the surface of the population.
True. Yeah, very true. Yes, we are. We are looking at how we can do things. We've actually got coming up at Christmas, we're getting the Big Give campaign, whereby we're actually raising funds so we can get the deer judged by fact, not fiction. So we're actually going to be doing huge amount of drone surveys covering the whole of the UK, whereby we can then get a very good idea of how many deer we are actually dealing with and what species. We can't clump deer as deer. They are totally different. If we look at a roe deer, for example, they are reasonably easy to manage. They're territorial species. You don't get them at high densities where they're going to do a huge amount of damage. Yes, a roe deer walking down a line of newly planted trees, nipping the top bud out of all of them, that's going to do a lot of damage. But in compared to a group of 300 fallow in your woodland, spending their nights there every night of a week and then leaving before light in the morning, those deer are going to be a real problem to that area and that habitat, and that affects all kinds of wildlife right across the board. So getting those figures is quite important. So we can get the figures, we can know what we're dealing with, we can come up with better information for people, and it gives it. Everything has to be fact driven. We can't just go on a finger in the air and have a guess at what it is.
Yeah.
And of course, if you only look at forestry, where the deer like to hide, you're going to be inundated with deer. And if you look at, say, we've got, I don't know how many deer, say 20, 30 deer per square kilometre of forestry. Could be more, could be less. But if we then multiplied that across every kilometre of the country, that's not going to give you an accurate answer to how many deer we've actually got. So we actually need to understand different environments, different parts of the country, and what the holding capacity of those areas are and what deer are on there.
So it is BDS's plan to, I think you mentioned that a second ago, to drone survey the entirety of the UK, or are you going to do kind of segments and then extrapolate it over? Yeah,
you're going to have to sample it. You're not going to get permission to do a drone survey across the whole of the UK. So it's going to have to be sampled. But it's not impossible to do. And you never know, because we are a charity and because we genuinely want to get the information for the welfare of deer and the good of deer, and maybe that will open doors for us to get that information from areas which other organisations might not be able to do.
Yeah. And do you see a time where it becomes more of a kind of statutory requirement on stalkers to do more of this kind of reporting of, sending your cull records in, or recording your sightings? Or I suppose you could sort of do it by, because they were talking about in the most recent consultation around deer management, around having like a deer dashboard, didn't they, for the area that you'd have, within Oxfordshire, for instance, X number have been shot within this season or whatever. Do you think that would be beneficial if there was a kind of a requirement for stalkers to say, this month I've shot 10 deer, this species, this sex, in this part of the country? Would that give you a good idea of roughly what the sort of, I suppose it depends on how many stalkers you have, etc. But do you think that would?
A little bit more than that, really, in my opinion. It's if you're going to start to count numbers of deer and require that information is passed on, and you're going to get culls then set for you by government, by organisations who may want to see deer as a species completely eradicated. You may find that actually it becomes a tool that people batter you with after a while. So I suppose in reality, yes, I do see that it's going to become something we have to adhere to more. Certainly everything we have to do, everything we have to fight for the welfare of deer has to come down to facts, not fiction. So facts is knowing the actual number of deer we've got there. It's no good guessing. So if we've got the facts, then we can make decisions based on them facts. But it's who's collating the facts, what that information is being used for, and where it all might end up in the end of it is anybody's guess. But that probably won't be my problem at that stage.
I hadn't considered it in that sense, in terms of where and how this data ends up and how it's used could actually be in the wrong hands and in the wrong context. Sorry, it could be incredibly dangerous. I hadn't considered it in the way that you think you've just phrased it, Nick, of well, if the wrong people get hold of the information and can prove, well, okay, there's, I don't know, for example, there's 2 million out there, so you need to be culling a million a year to keep the population still, and you're only culling 500,000 a year. Okay, well, you as the deer stalking fraternity aren't doing a particularly good job at sort of using indicative figures there. That in the wrong hands is quite a damaging message, and depending on how that's presented, that could do more damage than good. Whereas actually flipping it around the other way of using it in a very scientific way of, we now know there's this many, so we now need to do this, and this is our kind of action plan towards it, is a totally different message, isn't it? An approach.
And then you look at the others, you look at deeper into it, and when we're thinking about things like fallow deer across England, we've got areas which have got huge populations of fallow, and the damage they're doing is extraordinary. But it can impact crops, not as much as a couple of percent in the price going up or down, but it can make a difference to crops. But it's decimating the native woodland. It's decimating that cover, the ground nesting birds, where we used to have nightingales everywhere. Now they're hard to come by because the deer have eaten off all the ground cover. But in the same breath, if you look at things like roe deer, they're not going to do that damage. But they probably are the most valuable deer per kilogram. Yet they are easier to shoot in a lot of ways. If you've got a roebuck in a territory, you go back 2 days later, you're going to find that roebuck in that territory. He's not going to be a difficult chap to find and manage within the environment of England and Wales, the lowland type shooting.
And that actually, and sorry if I'm slightly slow, I've clearly had one too many beers here. But that's where I suppose in some ways that standard term of deer actually could potentially be a problem for us. Because say you do this survey and you go, okay, we're massively overpopulated with deer, and you put it sort of as bluntly as that, you'll get some people who go out and go, okay, well, we'll kill every single roe deer we've got on the farm because as a population, we're overrun with deer, as a kind of, and no one will be able to see me doing these air quotes at the moment. Whereas actually it needs to be phrased in such a way of, yes, we're overrun with deer, but the vast majority that we're overpopulated with are the herding species. And so those are the ones we need to go and focus on instead of, some of the herding species potentially, i.e. fallow. And we don't necessarily need to worry as much about, I don't know, roe and muntjac.
Well, I was just about to mention muntjac, but actually they are probably the biggest problem in that a muntjac now can, travel into cities. We find them in city centres, in large gardens. They love the railway lines up and down the country because underneath all that buddleia that seems to grow all along the railway tracks, it's a highway for the muntjac to get into city centres. Then they're getting into these large gardens. Once they're inside one of these large city gardens that run down to the railway line, it's an ecosystem which looks after muntjac brilliantly. So they don't need to leave that. They can happily stay there. And the muntjac, which is a non-native species, it's an invasive species, and there are certain quarters that would like to see it eradicated. From a venison point of view, it's a fantastic bit of meat. It's a really great, tasty piece of meat. And it's also really manageable from a stalker's point of view. You don't need to have all the equipment, the trucks, the quad bikes and everything to go out and shoot a few muntjac and actually do a lot of good for the environment by getting rid of them muntjac. You can carry them out with you quite easily. However, when you come and sell them as a carcass, because there is only so much venison you can eat, you're getting paid 50p a kilo, maybe more, maybe a little bit less, but it's putting a value of a muntjac. A 10 kilo muntjac is £5.
Yeah.
And that's
I say you're doing well if you can sell them. Our local dealer to us, and I won't name them, categorically, muntjac, no thanks. Chinese horse deer, no thanks. Roe, sometimes of year, no thanks. Just want the fallow. Just want nice, big, consistent 30 kilo carcasses.
Yeah. So how do we get a grip of muntjac? How do we get hold of muntjac? We did you mentioned it earlier on, the strategy that we put our information into about a year ago. That's the England wild deer strategy. We're still waiting to hear something from that now. If this is August in 2024, and it's at the moment we're yet to find out what's been said to ministers, let alone what's going to be happening. So it's a little bit of an unknown. But one of the things that we would certainly advocate is that if you want to get a handle on deer species, you're going to have to pay to get it done. You're going to have to pay the people who are doing the job to see if we can get them to actually get a grip of the species like muntjac. So it will mean you've got to pay in a way that makes it worth somebody going out and doing it. Because whilst you can, as I just said, you can go out, you can't eat all the deer you shoot. If you're managing a good number of muntjac, you're not going to want to eat them all. You can't give them all away to your friends. So you want to get some kind of value from them. And if you're only getting £5 a carcass from the game dealers, if you're getting some form of subsidy on top of that, which is going to be a bounty scheme, then it makes that carcass worth money. It makes it worth going out and shooting, worth managing.
And it seems to be the thing that we come back to that quite a lot in the conversations that we have about how we see deer management in the UK kind of going. And we've spoken about it a lot, but we're in this sort of biodiversity crisis at the moment in the whole planet, and in the UK especially. And a lot of estates are looking at deer as being something that, okay, there's actually now a serious financial advantage to having a serious amount of deer control, and the costs of doing it and the income from it simply don't stack up. Like I say with muntjac, there's not really an answer to doing it economically unless you do something like that. That's the only thing that's really left, isn't it? to incentivise the stalkers.
And of course, it's, you know, the previous government schemes and the government schemes going forward are all about paying the landowner and not about paying the guys who are going out and actually doing it. And, you know, if you really need to get a grip of the species, it needs to be everybody who's got them on their land who can go out as a stalker. Even if you've got a 10-acre bit of ground, you can go out and shoot a number of Monjack every week or month or whatever you can do. Actually, if you're getting decent, sensible return on the time it's taking you to go out and do it, then it makes it worthwhile, doesn't it? If you're going out and shooting a load of fallow, it makes it worthwhile. If you're getting good money for it, and trust me, if let's just say that every time you shot a fallow deer, you got paid between £60 and £100 extra on top of whatever you might get for the venison, all of a sudden there'd be an awful lot of people out there pulling the trigger, wouldn't there?
Yeah. And it's getting to the point where that is, you know, that's a figure that can be justifiable to somebody in government or a landowner or an estate or whoever to say, look, that's saving us, you know, more than that in the damage that the deer are doing to the habitats, to our, you know, countryside stewardship schemes, to our, you know, what have you.
The various government bodies that are shooting deer up and down the country. I might have my figures slightly wrong here, but I've got a feeling it's around about a £300 a deer mark to get it shot. So it's got to be paid for somehow. So, you know, you don't need to spend that amount of money. Get people who are wanting to go out and do it, because it's, you know, deer stalking as a I'm going to call it a professional hobby, because of the level of training that people undertake to become a deer stalker. You know, it's people who are really into their deer stalking. It's all they think about 24/7. It's going out at the weekend and shooting them few deer. And they've got themselves qualified, and they've come along and they've done our courses and they've done other people's courses, and they've got every ticket under the world that you could want, so that they can feel they're doing a really professional job. So they should be considered as professionals. And I certainly consider them as professionals. So, you know, they can't be discounted, and they need to get some worth going forward on a long term to get, you know, to pay for that professionalism.
Yeah. So I'm conscious, Nick. We've kept you for over an hour now, and we promised we'd only keep you for an hour, and you probably want to get off to bed or have some dinner. But if you had one kind of like plea or lasting message to leave with our listeners, whether that's from you personally or from the BDS, what would that message be?
Well, I've got a few things I'd like to finish off with.
Go on,
little bit of promotional stuff from a training point of view. So for anybody between now and the end of 2024 who signs up for and or completes a DSC 1 with the British Deer Society, you'll be put into a draw for one of two prizes, one of which is a Sauer 100 rifle with scope, with sound moderator and mounts. So you'll be up for running. It's in 308 caliber.
Can you retake your DSC 1 to get entered?
Yeah, you can take it more times than the rifle is worth, and that would be great.
Okay.
And the second thing is that we've got a 2-man lean-to high seat, which will be delivered to the second person out of the hat from anybody who completes a level 1 for British Deer Society in between now and the end of 2024. So from my training point of view, that's what I'd like to see done. The British Deer Society, yeah, we've got a couple of things coming up. We've got a Christmas big give, which is where we're going to try and raise some money to get the surveying work done. You know, it's very involved. Have a look on the website. It will give you information about that. And by the time this podcast comes out, that should all be live and ready to go. Otherwise, keep an eye on social media. It will happen. And we've also got our Change the Story campaign, which is, again, trying to get the message out so that we can try and get more and more people out there aware of deer on roads during the rut, and we want to try and get hundreds of thousands of people who drive up and down country lanes more aware of deer, more aware of how deer act on the roads, and just to keep our eyes open for them rather than driving blindly up roads. So that's our big thing. And lastly, we are a charity. We rely upon charitable donations. We give you a membership for your charitable donation. You can join on an annual membership, or you can join at £6 a month. So it makes it very affordable. It's easy to be a member of the British Deer Society now. I'm not saying move away from the other organisations. I'm not saying you should do that. What I am saying is, if you've got an interest and love in deer, it would be great to see you as part of our membership. It'd be great to see you helping with research that makes us valid and makes the welfare of deer an importance. And we'd just love to see you come along.
Brilliant. Sold. I'm going to sign up.
Yeah, I'm going to redo my DSE1.
Yeah, get in the running. Good rifle, that SAR 100.
Yeah,
very nice. Had my eye on that.
They're the one I use for training. It is thumbnail accurate. I can clover leaf at 100 yards all day long, and it's the one that I'm putting when I run a course. And most of my course managers are using the same rifle. It's just you put that in the guy's hands, and yeah, so long as they've got the crosshairs on the right place, they'll pass their DSC1 shooting test. It is a very, very accurate rifle and won't let you down.
There you go, ringing endorsement.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for taking the time. We really, really appreciate it. It's been a really, really interesting conversation.
Yeah, funny that is. When you get started, you could just keep going, can't you?
I know, it's crazy. We always say it to all our guests that we sort of try and keep these to about an hour long, but we always could go for hours if we wanted to. So yeah, thank you very much, Nick. Thank you to all our listeners, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.